Hello and welcome to Learn with Hema's class. My dear little champs, today we are going to do a poem, The Squirrel, written by Mildred Armstrong. The poet have described the squirrel the way he thinks the squirrel is, and he has noticed a specific characteristic of the squirrel regarding to its eating habit, its playing habit and its fur coat, that is the skin. Now in all these three things he has described in just 6 lines, which is the shortest poem. The Squirrel. The poet asks us, he starts with a question that have you ever seen a squirrel sitting on the ground? And if you have seen, you must have noticed that the squirrel eats something. This something is nuts. And how does the squirrel look like? So the description, how does the squirrel look like? Because the poet has seen it and therefore the poet describes the squirrel, how it looks like. So let us see how the squirrel is according to the poet, line by line explanation with complete set of question and answers based on NCERT pattern on this video. Take a look. He wore a question mark for tail, an overcoat of grey. He sat up straight to eat a nut. He liked to tease and play. And if we ran around his tree, he went the other way. So very beautifully, in very simple lines, 6 simple lines, he have described everything about the squirrel. He says that he wore a question mark for tail, an overcoat of grey. Now the outer appearance of the squirrel are said through these 2 lines. The outer appearance, the first appearance is the tail. How does the tail of a squirrel looks like? If you see, when the squirrel is sitting straight, अगर squirrel सीधा बैठी है तो उसकी tail जो है ऊपर की तरफ जाती है और जो tail का end है वो ऊपर से नीचे की तरफ झुक जाता है. You can see ये tail जो है उसकी नीचे से ऊपर की तरफ जाती है, खड़ी रहती है और ये जो टिप है टेल का वो उसका इस तरीके से कुछ झुका हुआ रहता है. So what it is making? What shape it is making? It is making the shape of a question mark. It is the sign of an interrogation, that is question mark. So इस चीज को, इस पोएट की जो टेल है, टेल के कैरेक्टरिस्टिक के ऊपर, टेल के फीचर के ऊपर उसने ये लाइन लिखी है, पोएट ने, उन्होंने ये लाइन लिखी है, he wore a question mark for tail. That is, स्क्विरल ने क्या पहन रखा है? एक क्वेश्चन मार्क. और ये क्वेश्चन मार्क क्या है स्क्विरल का? उसका टेल है. एन ओवरकोट ऑफ ग्रे मीन्स उसका जो स्किन है वो पूरा फेदरी है, फरी है. नॉर्मली हम फरी कपड़े कब पहनते हैं? ठंडी के सीजन में वार्म क्लोथ्स, एज अ वार्म क्लोथ हम फरी कोट पहनते हैं. ओवरकोट जिसे हम कहते हैं ना, कपड़ों के ऊपर हमें वार्म करने के लिए और एक कोट पहनते हैं लंबा सा, वो जो लूज होता है, तो उसे हम ओवरकोट कहते हैं. तो ये स्क्विरल का जो स्किन है वो स्किन ही बहुत फेदरी है, फरी है. तो ये जो है स्किन उसका फर वाला, दिस इज ऑफ ग्रे कलर, दैट इज वाई इट इज सेड एन ओवरकोट ऑफ ग्रे. तो क्या पहन रखा है स्क्विरल ने? व्हाट हैज द स्क्विरल वॉर्न? He has worn a question mark for tail, that is in the name of a tail it has a question mark shape, and an overcoat of grey, that is its skin is furry with a grey color. He sat up straight to eat a nut. He liked to tease and play. Now the poet also tells how the squirrel is eating nuts. For eating nuts, he sits straight. The squirrel sits straight to eat a nut, and also he likes to tease and play. You must have seen a squirrel's teeth. 2 teeth you can see. The squirrel's teeth are always in the front, if you have ever noticed. So you see that the squirrel teases and he plays. You will always find, if you look around the garden areas, wherever the many trees are there, somewhere you can find the such kind of creature, the squirrel, and you will see that always it is running here and there, and as if it is playing hide and seek with us, with humans. It is like that. So he sat up straight to eat a nut. He liked to tease and play. So for eating nut, the squirrel is sitting straight and the squirrel likes to tease and play. To whom the squirrel is teasing and playing? The squirrel is teasing and playing with the poet. And if we ran around his tree, he went the other way. So now we can understand over here the squirrel teases and plays with the poet only when the poet is far away from the squirrel. But when the poet goes near the squirrel just to play along with the squirrel runs the other way. That means the squirrel is trying to play hide and seek. So this is a very beautiful poem written by the poet Mildred Armstrong. Now let us go to the question and answer section. The Squirrel by Mildred Armstrong. Firstly, we are going to do the summary. The poet saw a squirrel sitting on a tree and eating nuts. Its tail was raised upwards with the tip pointing downwards. Thus the tail seemed to be making a question mark. It had a grey coat. It was so loose that the poet calls it an overcoat. In order to eat a nut, it was sitting straight. Squirrel is funny little animal that likes to play with human beings. If human beings ran around his tree, the squirrel wouldn't be frightened. It would like to tease and play. To do so, it would also run around the tree, but from the opposite side. Now this is the poem again. He wore a question mark for tail. The entire thing he went the other way. Now this poem we are going to do the paraphrase and question and answers related to this part. This is the paraphrase of the entire poem. The formation of the squirrel's tail that is raised upwards with its tip pointing downwards is identical to a question mark. It is blessed with a grey coat and positions itself straight to eat a nut. The squirrel is quite playful as it loves to run the opposite direction that the prank-loving human beings take when they run around its tree. Now these are multiple choice questions. I have already tick marked the answers. The squirrel wore a coat. When the squirrel raises the tail, its tip keeps pointing down. The squirrel's hobby is to do some funny tricks. A squirrel likes to play with human beings. If humans ran around the squirrel, it wouldn't be frightened. Now these are the questions. Why does the poet say the squirrel wore a question mark for tail? The poet says that the squirrel wore a question mark for tail because the tail of a squirrel appears so. When the squirrel raises its upwards to sit, its tip keeps pointing to the ground, making a sign of interrogation. Its tail can be described as long and bushy. Now this is the second question. Do we usually say that an animal wears a tail? What do we say? No, we do not usually say that an animal wears a tail, but we do say that an animal wears a coat. Now let's learn how this wear word can be used in different contexts. The different uses of wear. To carry or have on the body, uses he wears a wig, he wears a ring. To wear in one's aspect, uses he wears a smile. To cause, to diminish or to deteriorate, uses the waves have worn these rocks. To consume gradually by use or any continued process, uses illness has worn the bloom from her face. Retain, shape, color, firmness, etc. So the uses, it's a strong fabric that will wear. Of time to pass, especially slowly or tediously, so use, as the day wore on, we grew more discouraged. Now this is the third question. He liked to tease and play. Who is teasing whom? How? The squirrel teases human beings. It does so when it eats nuts and other fruit which human beings eat. Describe the tail of a squirrel. A squirrel has a long tail compared to its body. Like the rest of the body, its color is grey. It's bushy and bent at the outer end. Does a squirrel fear man? The squirrel does not fear a man unless one tries to get hold of it. Where is the squirrel generally found? A squirrel is generally found in or around a tall, thick tree. These are objective type questions. The squirrel was sitting on a tree eating nuts. The poetic device used in the tale was like a question mark is simile. The squirrel sat in. Now in this question there are two options, in a straight manner and an erect position. So both are correct. So for this we have taken the fourth option. Its hobby was, again you have two options over here, 1 and 3, to play and to indulge in mockery. Mockery means teasing. So both 1 and 3. The coat of the squirrel was grey. The squirrel went the other way shows its different attitude towards the humans. Now let's learn some very short answer type questions. What is being compared to a grey overcoat? The squirrel's body is being compared to a grey overcoat. Discuss the posture of the squirrel as discussed in the line 3 of the poem. The squirrel sat up straight to eat a nut, else the squirrel usually sits and runs with a bended back. What did the squirrel do if someone came too close to his tree? The squirrel would run away in the opposite direction if someone came too close to his tree. Now we shall do some short answer type questions. Having observed the squirrels around us, can we say that a squirrel is a fast-paced animal? Yes. Based on our observations of the squirrels around us, we can say that a squirrel is a fast-paced animal. We rarely come across squirrels sitting still except when they are biting into the nuts. Usually we see the squirrels running from one place to another with great energy. What does the poem say about the poet's choice of the subject? The poem is a reflection of the poet's desire to compose poetry on most mundane elements that we come across in our day-to-day surrounding. A squirrel is the most commonly found animal that we see around us, yet very few of us would have thought of it as a potent subject matter for a writer's pen. The poet very simplistically discusses the various aspects of the squirrel which each one of us must have observed closely. Now these are the 3 lines passage you can say, and from these 3 lines some questions are based on these 3 lines. First one is give a synonym for like in the context of the poem, so it's relish. Teasing the poet's way of dash with the squirrel playing. Use the word run in a sentence of your own. It is joy to see children running in various directions playing in the garden. Choose a befitting adjective to describe the nature of squirrel. It's playful. Identify the he in the first line. So the he is the squirrel. Who went the other way? The squirrel. So with this we end the poem. I hope you all have loved it, liked it. So please do share it with your friends. We'll soon meet in the other video. हम जल्द ही मिलेंगे दूसरे वीडियो में. तब तक के लिए stay safe, stay secure. Thank you.